All right. Just checking to see my sound. I'm going to start in 2 seconds. I want to reveal the solution set for the sample exam, and then we'll go from there. So hold your horses for 2 seconds, and we'll share my screen soon. Show. All right. And while we're at it, if you guys could come up with whatever you want to talk about or whatever you want to ask about for the course. I have a couple things in mind just because of what some of the emails I was getting this weekend, but I'm more than happy to go over whatever you guys want to go over. That's the point of these synchronous lectures. So hold on while but just come up with what you want to talk about. All right. Let's see what we have for the chat, and then we'll go from there. See all the values of Malloc array during a debug mode. Yes, that is a great question. And the big problem with pointers and dynamic arrays. We can definitely go over IO as well. Let's see if we can go over a dynamic array with Malloc. Let's look at the memory in there. And then also, it's such a pain to go over, just letting you know that it is the common pain point for 99.99% of people. See, it's a real big pain when it comes to dynamic memory. So you get all these little cutesy workarounds when it comes to debug mode and debugging your code, but it's a big pain, and we can definitely go over IO. And those functions are included, but the IO functions themselves, put them on a cheat sheet, right? Put down the function names on a sheet of paper, bring them to the exam, make sure you know how to call them, but I'm not asking for memorization. Even if you spelled it wrong on the exam and it's close enough, we're going to be like, oh, that's pretty close. How you use it is a different beast. And we're going over that in the assignment this week. So we'll definitely go over that. And we'll also make sure we look at Malloc, because Malloc ends up being a big old pain. So let's do a dynamic memory with Malloc and something similar to what we were doing for similar to what we're doing for the assignment. Okay. So let's make a brand new Malloc reader, let's call it. Okay. Oh, I need to show my screen. So before everyone starts freaking out about that. Let's do this, share screen, share it. And if you have other questions while we're doing this, please ask away. It also probably would be beneficial, because I don't want to slow everything down here. If anybody wants to do a quick post on Discord saying, hey, we're doing the synchronous lecture, that would be great. So before I get going here, I want to go over a couple things, but so let's, I'm going to also need the IO stream, I guess. Is it standard IO? I think it's standard IO. Okay. And I'll include assert as well. Just because I know I'm going to use, I always call asserts. I'm just a creature of habit that way. Okay, so let's go over what, and let me know if you can't hear me correctly or anything like that. Let's go over what we were talking about, or what's been going on over this weekend. I've had a number of people write me saying, oh my God, I'm confused with, we can put down these things here, like, we got to do some struct stuff. There we go, spelling, and file IO. All which can be challenging, and they require practice. And so I have had a number of students ask they're saying after, let's do that. After we hit structs, suddenly the class got very, very confusing. And I'm always curious as to why, if there's something in particular that's throwing people off. And I don't think, I'm not sure if those students are here. Maybe one of them, you are here. If you're here and you want to speak up, please do so. Because I want to make sure that we're getting unstuck, because a lot of the students have been saying, well, I had never programmed before, and that's the reason I don't understand this. And it's like, well, no, it requires practice. I'm hoping that it doesn't require prior programming experience in order to pass this class. That was never the intent. It requires practice, absolutely, but it should not require prior programming experience. In fact, prior programming experience can be actually detrimental. If you know JavaScript, C just looks kind of weird. So I want to make sure that you guys just reiterate and pronounce things correctly. No, just to reiterate, the whole point of these synchronous lectures were not for me to take up more of your time. They're not for me to hear my own voice or anything like that. They were purely there to help you guys get unstuck. If there's a topic that you didn't understand when you watched the videos, or you didn't understand while doing the assignments, that's what this is for. It's your time. Ask whatever questions you want. I could also go over the sample exam if you want me to go over the sample exam. That's fine as well. I have to look it up again, but I can go over the sample exam. I just released the solutions for the sample exam just now, so you can have a look at those as well. But if there's a particular topic that really, confusing you, that's what I want to hear about. So the Malloc and structs are not on the sample exam as far as I know. So no, structs could have been, but Malloc certainly wasn't. Philo certainly wasn't. So let's go over a couple of those things. What am I going to do here? So in this whole thing, here's what my outline is going to be. I'm going to read a file, then put data into memory, and save data into struct. Okay, that's what my plan is. I'm going to do things a bit different than the assignment. I will fully admit this is different from the assignment. I am going to read things into the struct directly. I'm going to call Malloc within the struct. Okay, let's see. Oh, darn it. I'm trying to see what the, do I have it here anywhere? Discord, darn you, Discord. Okay, I'm looking for where the chat window ended up going. There we go. Just getting the file into in a temporary array to the struct array. That gives me trouble. Great. Okay, we can definitely do that. So from the file into a temporary array into the struct array. The struct array, if you hadn't noticed, it's just a pointer. It's just pointing to something. It's just like put something here. So I'm just going to move that pointer to point to wherever the other thing was. So I can just say this pointer is pointing to this other array over here. Well, we can do that as let's do that. How to do that with text file. Okay, and we can read it in a text file. So let's make a text file. I'm going to make a tab delimited text file just because it's going to be different. Okay, so let's make a new file, new item, utility file, text file, demo file. Let's call it tab demo file. Just, it's a tab delimited file. Instead of using commas to separate the fields, I'm going to use a tab. I could use a dash. I could use a question mark. I can use whatever I want. That's what a delimiter is. It's something I said, look, this thing is going to separate my different fields. I don't want to use space as a delimiter because space gets used everywhere. Space was a delimiter way back in the day, and they ran into problems all over the place. That's why you have those quotes every time you want to put spaces in your directory when you're using the command line. You have to put, if you want to put space, you have to put quotes around the whole thing. Why? Because they limited themselves by allowing spaces way back in the day. Okay, so I'm going to put in a file. This is my test. How is it going? Question mark. And I'm going to also put some commas in here just to be a okay. Notice you could tell it's a tab when everything just shifts over as soon as you add a character. So this is an invisible single character, a tab. It is that /t. I can look for that just the same as I can look for a comma. And tab delimited files are a very, 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 very common way of doing things. Okay, so that's the file I'm going to be reading in. So let's do this. So I'm going to let me see how I could do this. I'm going to read in each of the fields in the tab delimited file. I'm going to save each of them separately. I'm just going to store a whole bunch of characters. Can I store character strings? Let me save the entire, take one of these fields, save the entire chunk of text from it. And then I'm just going to remove the first character. I'm going to save the first character from each of those fields. Hopefully that makes sense. Into a struct. So why? Because I'm coming up with a demo here, right? There's no rhyme or reason. I'm just going to read in a file, grab each field, read it in fully, and then I'm just going to pull out the first character from each one of those fields. If I don't do the first character, then I will get arrays within arrays. Perfectly valid to do. We just haven't covered that in the lectures yet. So you can have two-dimensional arrays, arrays of arrays. It gives you a grid. It gives you a matrix. Okay. But for the time being, I'm just going to read in a file. When I read in a file, I want to read in a file. I'm going to save each line. I am then going to pull off each of those lines, save that as a struct, and then maybe the return that struct. Okay. So I also heard I think I'm preaching to the choir versus preaching to people outside of the church. Anyways, I think I'm not necessarily talking to the people that I should be concerned about. The people that are not showing up are the people that I'm more concerned about for one very, very, very good reason. There are people supposedly in this class that do not understand how to make a function yet, which is kind of scary. So I'm going to make an array of structs, and then I'm going to return a pointer to that array of structs, maybe. Can I do that? Or will that work really well? Oh, let's just make an array of structs right now. So let's make a dynamic array of structs. So I'm going to have to make this struct array. And so here's my type def struct. And the name of, I think I should be able to call it, I always screw up the syntax here. So if I just go struct, and then say my first chars, I'm going to have an array of chars. It's an array of first chars. How do I know it's an array? There's no rhyme or reason. I'm going to forget because I have the memory of a goldfish. So that's why I put that A in front, saying it's an array. It's just pointing to something in memory. It's some location in memory. And I'm saying there's a whole bunch of crap in there. And then I'm also going to save, just for this particular case, typing would be useful. Unsigned int, num chars, num fields. Let's call it num fields, just so we're not always using the same terms. Okay, this is going to give me a struct with a pointer to the front of an array and the number of fields I'm going to be reading in. So I essentially have the array size and the array itself. And I know exactly how to parse that array now that I have this struct. I'm just making something up, but this would be how I'd make an array that stores the first character from each one of those fields and how many fields I'm reading things in. Okay, so I'm going to make, just to start off here, I forgot the name of my thing already. My first chars, let's call it so let's make an array of my first chars because we can. Okay, so this is going to be an array of structs, like how many, it's an array of structs. So I'm going to use Malloc the same way as I normally do. So Malloc always looks like this. And then I have how many bytes I need. The question is, how big does how big is this? I'm going to be making a whole lot of these structs. I'm going to save them, let's say. How many of these do I need? Well, I'm going to want to have some kind of, I could have it so that it reads in the number of lines, because what I'm going to be doing here is the following. I'm going to go line by line, making a struct for each one of these lines. If I had a whole bunch of these lines, then I'd need more structs, and I'm going to be making, let's do a bunch of these. I'm going to go line by line, I make a struct per line. And when I run out of lines, that's how many structs I needed. So I have an array of these structs. Okay, so the question is, how big is one of these structs? Well, I don't know how big the struct is. If I add another parameter, it changes the size. What I want is the size of, and then my first chars. The size of that struct. That's how much one of these structs is, multiplied by how many lines. Num lines file, let's call it. And I'm just going to put a constant in here. Constant int num lines file. And that is going to be, I'm going to make that 7 or something like that. We can actually count them out if you want. That's fine. What am I going to be doing with this? Well, what I could do is pass in that struct to a function that reads everything and stuffs it in that struct, in that array of structures. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say read tab file. That's going to be my name of my function. I'm going to make this function in a second. I'm going to have file name. I'm going to figure out what the file name is going to be. The file name, and then it's going to have the my first structs array. This thing here. Right, I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to change this in a second, but this is, and the number of lines or the size of the array, right? And the size of my array. That's what I'm going to make a function that does this. I made this array and I know how big it is, and I read it in a text file. And then at the end of the day, read tab file is going to just stuff things in that array of structs. Please stop me if that's not making sense. So I haven't even started anything yet, but I made an array of structs. I pass it into this other function, and it's just going to fill it in for me. This is actually why we use pointers later on, because you can actually, before when we were talking about, oh my gosh, your basic variables, you get a duplicate. When I pass in a pointer, it's pointing to the same chunk of memory. It's whatever this chunk of memory is pointing to, is pointing to the same chunk of memory, the location, the address of this thing. So whether I put my address on a sticky note, or I put it in an email, or I put it in a form online, or whatever the case, it's still my address. It's the same address, same location on the street, right? For my house. I didn't move, but I can duplicate that all I want. It's the same address. The thing it's pointing to, the actual address, doesn't change. The means of passing it off can change all I want. Okay. So I'm going to call malloc in this case. I do not know why it's not saying malloc is not defined, but we can always look into what the heck's going on here. I think I just have an error somewhere else. I can include malloc.h if I wanted to. You shouldn't need to. Although I think malloc is supposed to do something else, but here we go. The other part of this whole thing, it's a my first chars star. I got to cast this thing. So I'm going to make an array of those structs. But in fact, all it says is like, you got a chunk of memory. It's this many bytes long. Well, who cares? So I say, no, it's not a chunk of just random memory. It's a chunk of these structures. That's what this casting is doing right here. All right, let's see how people, I think I had a chat message. So let me just, nope, okay. Then I'm going to call this function. So let's figure out what this function looks like. I got to fix it anyway. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to drop down this function here. I'm going to, and this thing is going to return, let's say it returns an integer, the number of elements is going to read. It's going to have a char pointer, constant char pointer. File name. That seems like a pretty good variable name. It's the file, the name of the file. It's going to be tabdemofile.txt. Okay. I have an array of the structs. I like indicating that I'm outputting things into this array. So I'm going to pass in this array, but I'm expecting you to fill it in. Okay. And unsigned int, oh, I just call it int array size. So that is my prototype. Before I get going again on this, let's keep in mind, first of all, when I make a struct, it's outside of everything else. I don't do anything with it, or I don't put it inside my functions. Why? Because if it's in a function, the only person that has access to that is that function, or the only thing that has access to that is that function. If it's sitting out in the middle of nowhere, this blueprint is available for anyone to be able to use. So I put the blueprint out in the middle of the, no, like out in the field, essentially. I have all of these includes, I include my this, I have my prototypes. Most stuff is inside of a function, but the structs, since they're just a blueprint, my constants can be out there and my structs can be out there because it doesn't make, this does not make a struct. This is, if you wanted to make a struct, this is what it would look like. This is the blueprint for how a struct would look. This kind of struct would look. It doesn't mean you have it. It doesn't mean you make one. It means this is how you make one. So it is the recipe for the cake. It does not make a cake for you. It is the recipe for how you would make it. Hopefully that makes sense. You can put that recipe anywhere you want. You're not wasting eggs and milk. If you have a recipe for a cake, you only waste eggs and milk, or use resources when you actually make a cake. Okay, so let's move this thing down here. I gotta fill in this function. And since I am a lazy person, I'm gonna put like something like int num lines is equal to this. It's going to return some value. And that value is going to be how many of these structs I've read in, which is also happens to be the number of lines. Okay. So this is going to do a grand total of nothing. Why? Because before I get going, I want to see this thing actually compiles, because if it doesn't, it's not going to compile right here. So tab demo file.txt. Where is it going to be? This is going to be, if we actually looked at the properties for this thing, it's actually, I don't know if you can see it, it's actually in the exact same location as where my CPP file is when I make it. It gets put in the same location as my CPP file. If I'm running it from the command line, it's going to be searching where the exe file is. So you want to make sure that you're reading the right file in, but it's by default, it's going to be where my code is. That's where I have to put the actual file in on my hard drive, right? In my computer. It's not just anywhere. It's not just that it has to be visible or in here. It's that file, this tab demo file.txt is located actually in the same directory on my computer as the other stuff. Okay, here is the size of my structs. I just need a structs here. That's the name of the array of structs. And the size of my structs is this thing here. So that's what I'm going to call for this particular function. What I could do is have something like this. Assert num lines is less than or equal to the maximum size of the array, right? I don't go to, I don't start writing on other memory. This is the holy crap, something went wrong. I'm going to return My function always has to return something, my main function. And before I get going on this whole thing, I want to see, what else do I want to see? I have the number of lines that I've read in when I'm done. Oh, wait, if I call Malloc, what do I need to make sure I do? I got to free it. Okay, so at the very end of the day, I want to free a structs. We might see that we have to do something a little special. We'll see why. To be visited. Why? Because we're going to be using Malloc a whole bunch of other places to store stuff in an array. If I have, this sort of nested series of Malloc calls, I need to delete everything. I need to make sure, or free everything. I need to free up all of the memory. I should not, it's just a good habit to get into, just to make sure you free your memory. If I call Malloc, I got to call free. Okay. And yes, in case you're wondering why we don't use new, I hate Malloc. I hate calloc. I learned new when I was learning this because I learned C++ first. It's C++. That's the reason we have to use Malloc right now. So Malloc stands for memory allocation, but it is very antiquated. The fact you're doing the math, you're showing the size of this thing multiplied by the number that you want to keep. Okay. Everything worked. Did everything work well? That's freaking me out. Okay, let's give it a go. Should do nothing. It did nothing. Great. All right. I'm surprised that it compiled. Great. Now I know it. I'm at a stable state. Now I'm going to do a bit more coding. I'm going to test that. Then I'm going to make sure it's in a stable state. Do a bit more coding. Test that. Okay. So first of all, I want to check to see if file name is equal to null, as in I don't have anything here. There's you point to nothing. There's no file name. Or a structs out is equal to null. You could also say, or, that didn't work. There you go. Or array size is less than 1. Yeah, bad crap is happening. Return 0. Just get out. Right? I'm done. Just safety. Okay, next up, I need to read in that file. So let's read in that file. So what would I do? F open. I'm using the underscore S1 because it's safe. And I need a pointer to a file stream. Okay, well, I need a file stream pointer to begin with. File to open is a variable name. And I'm going to make what's called a pointer. I'm going to make a pointer to a pointer. And yes, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. But this ampersand means something is going to point to that file being opened up. So it's a pointer to a pointer. Why? Because it works that way. The reason I need to do that is because it's actually changing. It's changing this variable here depending on how this file open works. That's why we have this ampersand here. For the time being, you can memorize that part. I have a file name. So I have a file name. Great. And what my mode is it? Well, I'm reading it in, right? So it's R mode, read mode. And then I want to check to see if p file open works correctly. So if p file to open does not want to say is equal to null. Let's do that. Let's do it that way. Return 0, but I also want to give some kind of message because printf, holy cow, the file didn't open a file. Let's put a string in there. Didn't open correctly. /n on do a new line, and I'm going to put in the file name. When things go wrong, let the user know. I think that's fairly, hopefully that's not a very controversial point. Okay, so if it doesn't read incorrectly, that should happen. Well, let's find out if it reads incorrectly. Let's look at this thing. Nope, it read it incorrectly just fine, right? If it didn't read incorrectly, I would have hit this line, I would have gotten that error message, and I would have known. Okay, so we can also make a new print line statement. Reading in file, blah. I'll put a colon there, let's say. Let's get some error messages or some messages in here. All right, let's see what we have. Hey, we're reading in the file correctly. That's good to know. So let's go one step further. So I've opened the file. Because it's in the right directory where I expect it to see. And if I got that error message, I got to figure that out where the hell that file is first. It has to be in the same directory on the hard drive as my CPP file and all the rest of my code. Okay, number 2. So not just a link, the actual file has to move there. Number 2, I want to read in line by line. I can read in the entire line, or I can read in part by part. Let's read in the entire line because that's what's more like what's on the assignment. Okay, so what do I want to do? Let's make a big array of characters. A buffer meaning just it's something I can fill in and use up. I could call it scratch buffer. We have certain terms. Big temporary array, and let's make it a big temporary array of junk. So let's say 300 characters. If it's more than 300 characters, something's going to happen. In fact, I shouldn't actually have this. I should do something like the following: constant int buffer size. I want to have something to say like, I want a constant that I can keep on referring to, right? Give it a name like pi. I don't put down 3.14 blah, blah, blah. A, because it's an irrational number, but B, it's just, I don't want to have to rewrite this every time. Okay. I'm going to then call fget s. So that will go into this character buffer. It's going to be the maximum count. So that is buffer size. And my file stream is what I'm going to be using. And that is p file to open. That will read in a line of text into this buffer. And again, if we want to be paranoid beforehand, the line is and a buffer. Let's see it in action. Make sure it's working. The line is, this is my test. Yeah, that's the line. That's the first line of our file. That's great. Okay. Next step. I need to go line by line, grabbing or filling in things. fgetS, let's see what it returns. It returns a character pointer. Why? Because we need to see if it returns 0 or not, a null or not. And you've had that example in your code as well. So I want to keep on getting this. So I could say the following. This should work. At least I hope it will. Let's find out. If I get an infinite loop, so be it. Let's see it in action. So I'm going to get the next line. I'm going to get the next line. I'm going to get the next line. Every single time I get a new line, I fill it in. There we go. Let's compile one more time. Hey, that worked. Nice. This line, this line, this line, this line, this line. Right? It got all the lines. It seems to be doing it twice, though. I have a new line here, and then I'm not getting another line here. So, oh, actually, let's see one more time. No, that's fine, right? If I got this, the line is, and then a blank line, it would mean I had an extra problem. Okay. So I'm reading in each line, one after the other. It's including the carriage return, it seems. That's why it's going onto a new line at the end. That's why I have this double spacing. Okay, but let's move on from there. So,
Sorry,
yep.
I have a question. So, in your while loop, what's the parameter for it to stop?
Great question, because I got lazy for a second. Thank you. What is null? And that's a weird question. I won't put you on the spot for the answer on that one. Null is meaning it's not pointing to anything, right? But it also is exactly equivalent to 0, which is exactly equivalent to false. So people get really lazy. You'll see this in C code all over the place. They will just put if or while and then an expression, like some kind of function call. And it means if this thing is pointing to null, stop or don't do it. If it's something valid, some valid pointer, do something. So what I should have done to make it a bit clearer for you guys, while this is not equal to null, should be what I should be testing for. This is returning a pointer. If you look at what this thing returns, hopefully, there we go. It returns a character pointer, a pointer to a chunk of memory with characters in it. You would expect it to be pointing to this thing here, but if there's no line of code to read in, it will return null. It'll return there is no other characters to read in. So I'm pretty positive we had that in the previous assignments as well for reading in the character file. I'm trying to think here. Do I think pulling off each line as well was given to you as well in the previous assignments. So this has been, you've seen it before, it's been given to you, but yeah, that's a great question. Why is it not pointing to, what's it testing? It's testing to see if it's equal to null, as in there's no more lines of code to pull in or no more lines of text to pull in. Okay, and when it runs out of lines of text to pull in, this is null, and therefore I break out of my while loop. That
I
answer
have
your
a
question?
question.
Yep.
So does this it does this loop, and does that mean that all the lines are now in buffer at once, or is it replacing buffer every time?
It's not, well, the buffer, the chunk of space, the box it's storing everything in, that stays the same, but what's being put in the box changes every time. So imagine
Okay.
putting stuff in the box, throwing it out, putting stuff in the box, throwing it out.
Okay. So at the end of this, only the last line would be stored in a underscore buffer.
That's exactly right. I will get
Oh.
the next line, and so now I need to do something with that thing. Before I get the next line, I got to do something with that text.
Mm-hmm.
So let's make another function that takes that character array and stores the information in um, in that struct.
Okay.
All right, because I want to have something modular. I want something that breaks things into little chunks. How are we doing for time? We're doing okay. So here's what I'm proposing. I'm going to make something that just keeps on generating a new struct each time, and it just passes the struct back. Okay, so I'm going to have for struct, like the current struct, and then I'm going to have parse text. That's a bad name. You can drive yourself mad trying to come up with the best function names, and I apologize for not having always the best function names. I'm parsing the string of text, the buffer, and generating the structure based on that. So I'm going to pull out all the characters, pull off all the text, and store it in this struct. And I'm going to return that struct. So I need to, like, is it generate struct? Oh, you can call it generate struct or generate. Generate MFC. My first characters. It's also Microsoft Foundation classes, which is why I giggled, because I'm teaching that in 2400. Okay, so it's going to generate one of these structs based off of this array going in a buffer. It's a character array, right? So do I need the size of the array? No. Character arrays, I know how do I know I hit the end of my character array? I'll wait for this one. How do I know when I hit the end of a character array, or C string, if I want to call it that name? I'll wait. You're wasting time if you don't answer. Sorry. but it wakes people up, or I find out everyone's lost if I don't ask that. Yeah, you have an answer.
/0.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a character /0. It's a special character, which, by the way, happens to be exactly equal to 0, which is equal to false, which is equal to null, which is equal to, yeah. There's a lot of repetition in here. So it's looking for that /0 or /0. Yeah, it's more accurate. Thank you. /0, the character of that. So I don't need to pass in the length of the string. I can find it, strlen. Okay, so I'm going to pass in this array, this buffer array, and I'm going to pull off all the various characters, store it in something else, return that thing, and then I can move on to the next line. Okay, well, why don't I just actually, I have this array that I need to put something in, right? So a structs out, and this is going to be a position. Oh, I need to know how many lines I've read. Int num lines is equal to 0. So I can keep track of how many lines I've read in, and just, it's a counter, right? It's the next index. So when I've read one line, it goes from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 all the way up. And instead of returning 0, I could just return number of lines, couldn't I? That's how many lines I've read in. Hopefully it's going to work. Well, we'll find out the hard way. So that's what I would expect. And I'm going to double check my code afterwards. I still need to write this function. That's fine. So let's put that in there. Let's move this in here. My prototypes. And this is going to generate MFC. And do I want to call it buffer? Probably not. A line text or something like that. Line of text. This is what I'm reading in. Okay. It hasn't been defined yet, so let's define it. I'm going to make a brand new function. All these functions I want to organize my thoughts. I do not have the brain power to try and keep everything in main. This is for me to make my life easier. And if you don't get functions, please ask for help right now. That exam is going to be brutal if you don't get functions. I think you guys probably all do, but anyone that, if your friends don't get functions, tell them to talk to a TA, or you can explain it to them. This thing is going to read in that line of text, and then it's going to figure out, it's going to get the first character from each. Okay, so that's going to be a harder thing for me to figure out. I got to figure out how many of these things I can figure out how many tabs I need. That would work. And so I can figure out how many tabs I have in there. And then I can figure out, then I can go tab by tab down this thing. Okay. It's going to be a little wonky, but bear with me on this one. Int field num. Okay, so I'm going to just return. I'm going to make one of these things and just return it for right now. Or red val. All right. Just to make this thing compile. Oh, to return is used. It's being used. It's not being initialized. Great. So to return is equal to, I want to set some values in here. So this is going to be equal to null. To return, and number of fields is going to be equal to grand total of 0. Why? Because it can. And we're good. And this should not be a problem anymore. Let's compile it and see. All right. This is doing next to nothing. I'm just trying to make sure it compiles, and then I'll go back and fix it up. So I'm going to make one of these structs, increment the number of lines, and move on from there. And each, oh, that's what I need to do, is equal to cur struct. I'm just going to store it in the array that I passed in. So I passed in this bucket to put all these these structs in. I'm just going to plop them in one after the other, right? So I put in a position 0, put it in a position 1, put it in position 2 in this array of structs. So I make a new struct, put it in the bucket, put in the next bucket, make a new struct, put in the next bucket until I run out of lines. This thing is, again, not right, but it's not working yet, but I can test how things work. So what I could have is I might want to have this thing is returning the number of lines. Maybe I want a printf statement saying how many lines I would expect to have. So printf something like that. And I'm going to go check to see how many lines I should have with my little simple example. So how many lines should I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, actually, there's a number right on the side. I didn't even need to count. I could have been lazier. Okay, I should get 6. If I don't get 6, I should be worried. 6 lines were read in. Okay, that part's working. I read in 6 lines. It says I read in 6 lines. I'm good. The numbers, I don't have an off by 1 error or something weird like that. Okay, so I've read in 6 lines. Let's do this, generate the MFC. So what am I going to do? I'm going to find the first available tab. I could do strchr, but I think that's going to be more trouble than it's worth. But you could do that. You can strchr, searching for a character in the string, finds out where it is, but it returns a pointer to the location in the string. Instead, I'm just going to walk down my string. Every time I find a tab, I'm going to say, oh, the number of fields has changed. And I'm going to read in the text like to the next tab. So I'm going to find tabs. I'm going to find any 2 tabs, and I'm going to just, sorry, here we go. Any 2 tabs, next 2 tabs, next 2 tabs. I'm just going to find pairs of tabs as I walk down this thing, and I'm just going to get the string for that tab. I'm also, let me see what the best way of doing this. I need a number of characters from that string. Okay, that should do it. I'll make an array of characters. I can get just the first character from the field if I wanted to right now, or I can read in the entire string. Let's just get the first character. Okay. So I am going to have some kind of, what can I do here? Oh, let's do in strlen, or I think it's actually going to return that, but and strlen is going to return, oh, I need to, it's going to tell me what that thing is. IOStream is not the right thing I wanted, but it's going to give me strlen. I think it might be standard library, stdlib might be where, let's find out. Does that solve the problem? No. Oh, I may have something here. That would work, but that's the string library. I don't want that, but I'm going to do it. I can do it anyways. I don't need the standard library. Right. The includes, if you can get it working, I'm not going to be picking on whether you included certain things. Hell, if you don't have the includes in your solutions for the exam, I don't really care. It's going to be harder for you to compile your code, but it doesn't make your code right or wrong. Okay, so I'm going to get the length of my string. I'm going to use a for loop here because I can. So for int I is equal to 0, I is less than, text len, I plus plus. Don't even think about it, just 0 to the length, I plus plus. Okay, I want to figure out how many tabs I have. So if, let me see here, a line text at position I is equal to a tab, then I'm going to get the character immediately after that, but maybe I don't want that actually. What I want is the first character, and then I want to get the character. I want to get the character where my last tab was. And then I want to get the character where, so first char pos is equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to take the position where the character is going to be. When I find the next tab, I'm just going to output that character, or I'm going to keep track of that character. When I find a tab, I'm just going to then, every time, so let me see here. How do I want to do this? Every time I get a tab, I want to get the character immediately afterwards, but I also want to get the very, very first character, right? So let me look at this thing here. What I want is this thing here, position 0. I find the tab right here, this thing here. I want the character immediately right after that. So what I could do is change the character position. When I find a tab, change the character position to be 1 past that. And every time I find a tab, or I get to the end, when I get to the end of the file, I will store the character at those positions. This is me coming up with some kind of example here. So every time I find a tab, I'm going to save. I need to save the character. Oof, I'm going to save those characters individually. I don't know how many characters I have. So I could do 1, 2. So I don't know how many tabs I have. So either I could make my dynamic array immediately, and then, but I want to have it the right size. So either I need to make a static array, fill in the static array, and then transfer everything over, or I need to do this twice. I need to find out how many tabs I have. Okay, so why don't I do this twice? So let's do it the twice version of it. It shouldn't hurt. Well, that's a bit slower, but that's fine. I am going to, and I should put, this is the kind of place here I want to put a comment. Find how tabs there are. Okay, so every time I have a tab, int num fields is equal to 0. Actually, num field should be equal to 1, because if I don't have any tabs, there's 1 field, unless the whole thing is, oh, I can just actually use this thing here, num fields. That's much better. I don't even need this parameter here. Is equal to 1. All right. Num fields plus plus. Okay. So every single time I find a tab, I increment the number of fields that I have. That's step 1. Then I'm going to make an array of first chars. How big is this array? It's num field size. So to return, let's do it in 2 steps here. Char array. Size of char multiplied by, and then to return the num fields. You'll notice that, by the way, when we do this, I could make it, number of fields plus 1 or something, just to make sure we have, if it ever gets interpreted as a string, or I could just keep it the way it is. So let's do it, the number of characters plus 1, just so I have a 0 character at the end, just on the safe side. The number of fields I have in total would be that number. But in case somebody wants to accidentally read this as a string, I got that 0 at the end. Okay. So this is going to give me an array. So let's just do this. to return dot a first chars is equal to char array. This thing has an address. The other thing has an address. I just say, hey, make your address equal to this thing's address. No harm, no foul. Right? This is a chunk of memory that's being given to you. This is pointing to the chunk of memory. This thing is now pointing to the same chunk of memory. It's pointing to the same location in space. They're both pointing to the same thing. So it's no real, hopefully no big deal for the system. Okay. Now, next part, I want to get each of those characters. So, well, let's also do to return dot a first chars at position to return num fields. Let's put that safety in there. No, Malloc doesn't clear up anything for me. It doesn't free up memory. Like, it gives me memory, but there could be gibberish in there. It could be gobbledygook. Calloc cleans it up, but Malloc doesn't. So if you call Malloc, it's probably a safe bet to put a 0 at the end. It's not going to give you zeros by default, naturally. C doesn't work, unfortunately, does not work that way. Okay, so I want to get the first character in each one of these things. So what I want to do is walk down this thing. I will get the first character, find the next tab, get the character after that, and walk my way down this thing. Okay, that should work. I'm going to use the same for loop, pretty much. And I don't need to keep that around anymore. I'm going to put the very first first characters at position 0. That is going to be whatever my A line text at position 0 was. The first character, this is a presumption on my part. I'm presuming the first field is not empty. If I don't want to make that presumption, I need to do some other stuff. So all I'm just going to do is set this first one, and then I need to int field num is equal to 0, field num plus 1. Okay. If the tab is equal to this, I'm going to get the character immediately after the tab. Field num, and I'm also going to increase the number of fields, is equal to a line text at position I plus 1, because we know it ends in a 0. That's going to be safe. So I'm going to get the character at position I plus 1, one step past the tab. That's what I'm going to store in this array. I need to increase my field number first. So every time I find a tab, I'm going to the next field, provided I have, and then when I run out of lines, I'm done. Okay, then I'm going to return this whole thing afterwards. Yeah, that hopefully should do it. Let's find out. Yes, this is, by the way, complicated. It should take you some time. I don't expect to throw something like that on an exam. It's too nuanced. Now, if I give you this code and have an error in it and you find the error, that's reasonable. But to generate it on an exam is a pain in the bum. Okay. So what's wrong with this? Readable size of chart. But 2 bytes might be written. Okay. We don't know how many bytes might be written on this thing. Field num. It's a warning. I'd probably turn off the warning, but is equal. That's equal to. This is the kind of test I would want. What's a safe thing to know? I know that the field number I'm on it's got to be less than or equal to the total number of fields. Otherwise, I'm outside of the bounds, right? I'm in trouble if I try and do anything else. Okay, I'm just saving the first character from each of these fields into this array. And then when I'm done, I'm going to just maybe print off this entire struct. Because I have that 0 at the end. Why not? Okay. We're returning those number of lines. Well, there's only one way to find out. Okay, so there are islands right in. I might want to have, let's just do it right in here. I get this struct, and then is, and then new line. Put some spaces in there, it'll make it look nice. And cur struct dot this whole thing. It's an array of characters, so I can pretend it's a string. It'll spit it out. I could also have it say how many. The first line of characters is this with fields. Put that on a new line just to make it look pretty. And cur struct dot num fields. Right. There was a question, so let's see. Oh, maybe there wasn't a question. I thought there was a question. If there's a question, please unmute for a second just in case I'm missing comments. Let's see this in action though. Okay. So what would I expect here? This is the scientific method. I expect capital T, I, M, T. 4 characters. T, I, M, T, then H, I, I, T, H, I, I, G, H, A, I, G, H, I, I, G. Okay. The comma won't make any difference whatsoever. Well, let's figure it out. Let's give it a run and see what happens. Because I got to stop in a second. Is T, I, M, T, H, I, I, G, H, I, I, G, H, I, I, G, H, I, I, G. That's actually doing it. That's wild. Okay. One last thing before I go, because I do actually have to go. And please, I can do another tutorial if you want, but there's not that many people here. I'm more than happy to answer questions about the sample exams or answer questions before up to the exam itself. You should be able to see what the format of the exam is as well on See You Learn Now. But before I go, the thing that you should be paranoid about is every time I call Malloc, I got to worry where I call free. I haven't called free on that. Even if I delete the array of structs, I just get rid of the structs. I get rid of the piece of paper saying the address. I didn't free up the memory itself. I didn't give back. I didn't sell the house, essentially. I need to go around and every time for each one of those structs, I need to clean them up. And so I said, to be revisited right here. Yeah, I got to revisit it. So let's do this. Free my structs is the name of the function. A structs. And do we have the number of lines? Number of lines. Oh, no, the structs is a certain size. This thing. Okay. I'm going to have a function to do this because, well, you should know me by now to know that I like putting things into functions. So I have an array of these structs, and I have int array size, and I'm going to have void for right now. And let's see why is it yelling at me? It's not yelling at me anymore. I'm going to move that down. And all this thing is going to do is it's going to free up things. So I have a for loop. I is less than array size. I plus plus. For, okay. So actually, I don't want array size here. I don't want it in this one here. I want num lines. because if I start calling free on things that I never actually got memory for, it's going to blow up in my face. So I'm just going to free up each one of the structs I made, not the ones that I didn't make, right? There's some extra stuff in here. So for each one of my arrays, the elements, what do I need to do? I'm going to get a structs at position I. And then what I want to do is get this thing, and I want to free that. I want to then, out of pure paranoia, and paranoia is good, set it to null. I've dealt with this. It's freed, because otherwise I don't know. If I accidentally looped and hit the same point each time, if I accidentally put 0 here, I just try and free the same data multiple times. I want to put it as null to make sure I can't do that. Something stupid like that. Okay, and then I want to free a structs. Let's also, because that was the original question I was being asked, let's drop down a breakpoint in right here. Okay. Let's run it and see what happens. Okay, I'm going to go one line down, and I want to look at a structs. And a structs, I get one element, y. And this is a common issue for a lot of people, because although you know and I both know that it's an array, the compiler does not know. C does not know. The operating system does not know. It has a pointer to memory. It does not have an array. It is an array, but it's just pointing to it. If you give me an address, I don't know if it's a bungalow, a condo, an apartment, or what, blah, 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 business. I don't know what's there. I don't know what it looks like or anything like that. I just have an address. I don't know if it's row housing. I don't know if it's a duplex. I don't know anything about where I'm going. So with a dynamic array, it will look like you have one element, when in fact you have a full array. You just can't look at the other elements unless you play around with it. So you can do things like, let me see if I can add a watch or something like this. And I can say a structs at position 1, and that will give me the next one. Or I could say a structs at position, I have to just copy a value or add a value. I should be able to modify it though. I should be able to change each one of those things. If I want to get to the next element, I want to look at the 17th element, I gotta manually put it in there like that and say, by the way, I'm looking at the 17th element in this array. Otherwise, it just thinks it's a pointer to memory. And I have to like either put a for loop and watch it that way or other things. All I know is it's an address somewhere. I don't know what's an array. It's one of the major limitations of C. There's no working around it. It's something C and C++ all have that as a limitation because it doesn't know. It just knows it's some chunk of memory somewhere. It doesn't have all the extra cruft that a lot of other languages do to help you find that, know the array size. You don't know what the array size is. You just know it's a chunk of memory. Python and JavaScript and Java give you the ability to find the array size because it passes extra information that it doesn't need to. Other languages do garbage cleanup where you don't have to call free every time. C doesn't give you that. You have to manually free things. People like it, despite the fact that you might think, who in their right mind would like that? People love that about C because it gives you full control and it doesn't slow anything down. That's why games are programmed in C, not in C++, not in Java, not normally in Python or any other language. They're programmed in C or C++ actually, because they're fast, because it doesn't have any of the extra overhead that these other languages, the niceties of the other languages are not there. It's really kind of brutal to new users. And that would be an example. So anyways, if I run this all the way through, oh, hey, I got a problem here. Nice. What happened here? No missing symbol. Let's find out what happened there. The free is almost invariable what the problem is. I have this array. I'm going to put my breakpoint here. Okay, I'm going to walk down this thing. 2, 3, 4, 5. Array strides. Could we have 6 lines? Maybe we had 6 lines. Yeah, and then finally, that may have been causing the problem. I know. I'm going to go. Sorry, I'm supposed to pick up my kids now. I'm late. Okay, and then from there, that's because I called free another time. That's the kind of error you get when you call free multiple times. I forgot to remove this line of text. That's why we have a null. We've set the pointer to null, because if you don't set the pointer to null, you get that, which is a pain. What I should have is a structs is equal to null. And now if I try and call free, I get a null pointer exception, not some weird gibberish gobbledygook when I run my program. Okay, I really have to pick up my kids right now. So let me see if I can answer any questions you guys have about this. I will more than happy to do another one of these because I think we got caught up in the weeds here. We got through everything. And hopefully helps with the assignment, but I want to make sure you're feeling comfortable with the exam itself. So does anybody have any questions right now? Otherwise, what we'll do is I'll post this online and then we'll /0. George is right.
Well, you might not have time to go through it right now, but something that was sort of confusing me was like how you got it to generate the first character after the tabs.
That's me being cutesy. So that's not something I would normally.
I think it wants us to take like a whole chunk of that, like basically everything after the delimiter, and put it into an array. And that was kind of confusing me how we would do that.
It's given to you.
Is this?
Yeah, that's A8. I gave it the code already. That's why I was saying just take the code. It's a pain in the ass.
I was having trouble deciphering it though.
Okay, so all that's saying is get me the 10th field or the 11th field, which will put all of that into a character array that you pass in. Mm-hmm. So you pass in a character array, right? You pass in what field you want, and it will just fill that character array with that little snippet of the text. And I think A8's solution has also been posted, so you can look at how I'm actually calling it there. But yeah, because that is actually a challenge. What you would need to do is find where the tab is. After the tab, after the tab, you're going to do something. And then, so if you want to do it yourself, what you do is you find the tab, you'd find the next tab or the end of the line, and then you you'd copy character by character all those characters from the original line of text into this new array.
Okay.
Right? But that's a pain in the bum, which is why I gave you the code, because I didn't want to spook people more than I had to.
Well, reading it's kind of spooking me.
I'm really confused by I don't know how to solve the problem. So it's a legitimate concern. Get field at and get num fields, right? That's right.
Yeah, it's the get field at one that I'm like, I kind of know what it's supposed to be doing. I just don't really understand how it's doing it.
You pass in the array it's going to go to, you pass in the array it's coming from, and you pass in whichever number field that you want, the 0th field, the 1th field, and you just transfer stuff over. The issue is this is a regular problem, I think, for me, but I'm still coming to terms with Carleton students being different than Northeastern students in many ways. I'm used to putting in more instructions because they want to read more instructions and they wanted like thematic assignments and stuff. And I come here and people are like, oh my God, you put more text in there. I don't want to read. It's just sort of throwing me off. Reading is good sometimes. Or giving code is actually supposed to be helping and it's actually hurting people. So if it's confusing, I can explain things. I just need people to ask the questions.
For sure.
Yeah.
I know you have to go, so.
Yeah. So ask away. And if you ask on Piazza, I can answer it tonight. And then I can hopefully help people out, other people as well, because I know you're not the only person.
Okay, good.
All right. You're all in the same boat. You guys are doing well. You got this. I'm positive of that. I'm more concerned about the people that don't show up. but I'm positive you got this.
I'm sure I'll get it eventually. Just gotta get there.
Yeah, it takes practice, and it seems really scary at first, but everyone gets there. It hurts a little bit. It's like learning
Mhm.
induction as well, or a lot of math, calculus,
Yep.
right?
For sure.
I never got through calculus. I did it, but I didn't do well.
It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thank you, everyone. I will talk to you guys later. I appreciate you showing up.
Yeah.
Cheers. Bye.